Vietnam's air force is amongst the largest in the entire Southeast Asian region. It wields significant force, operating aircrafts such as the Sukhoi line from Russia, to air defense systems from Israel, and even some lethal armaments from the former Soviet Union. This has then led some people to question just how strong is Vietnam's air force. Does it have the capabilities to defend against China's enormous force? Or is it just one of the small-time players in Southeast Asia? Well, let us discuss this starting with the Air Force's history. The People's Air Force, as it is normally called, was founded in 1955. Initially, they were operating a small number of fleets, mostly coming from the Soviet Union. These were aircraft such as the Antonov An-2 and the Lisunov Li-2, and then, as years went by, they acquired better, faster, and more advanced jet fighters. Starting with the Mikoyan Gurevich MiG-17 in 1964, the People's Air Force subsequently received a MiG-21 a year later. The MiG-21 was known as the most produced supersonic jet aircraft in aviation history. Vietnamese pilots were trained by various people, some from China to the Soviet Union, and even defectors from the West. What may even surprise most people is that during the Vietnam War, some aircrafts from the United States were captured and used by Vietnamese pilots. When South Vietnam was overrun in 1975, approximately 877 aircrafts were captured, of which 41 were F-5Es and 95 were A-37s. Further data shows that between 1953 and 1991, approximately 700 warplanes, 120 helicopters, and 158 missile complexes were supplied to North Vietnam, by the USSR and China. Or, put it simply, a huge amount of arsenal that made up Vietnam's air force came from foreign suppliers. Some, which are even used today, came from that era. To answer how strong Vietnam's air force was prior to the 21st century is indeed easy. The country had a vast amount of armaments compared to neighboring countries. They were trained not just as a form of exercise, but in real war. Yet, does the same situation carry on to today's standards? Well, to understand that, let us see just how big Vietnam's air force is. According to a variety of sources, the number of units operating in the air force ranged from 35,000 to 40,000. These are then stationed in many parts of the country. Vietnam's airbase is spread out across the country. Some were used during the war, some have been closed, and some have been transformed for commercial purposes. The most vital part of Vietnam's air force strength lies in its number of aircrafts. There are approximately 300 aircrafts, which are used by the Air Force. These range from the Sukhoi Su-22, Su-27, and Su-30 from the Soviet Union, and then to Russia. They also operate tactical military transports, such as the Casa C-295, and several helicopters, such as the Mi-8. Throughout the 21st century, however, Vietnam has actively retired some of its former aircrafts, mostly old, second-hand and necessary to give way to newer generations. Now the Air Force also operates several armaments and air defense systems. First, armaments are huge. Vietnam operates several air-to-air and air-to-surface missiles. Most of these are supplied directly by Russia, missiles that can shoot down aerial and land threats. Secondly, the country's air defense system is huge. While most of it also comes from Russia and older equipment from the Soviet Union, there are also relatively newer ones, such as the Spider from Israel. Also known as the surface-to-air Python and Derby, is a short and medium-range mobile air defense system developed by Rafael Advanced Defense Systems with assistance from Israel Aerospace Industries. Vietnam's Air Force also operates the S-300 missile system, which is regarded as one of the most potent anti-aircraft missile systems in active use. So these are a summary of what Vietnam's Air Force looks like. Old equipment, some relatively new technology. Some of these aircrafts have been redeveloped, but to actively say that Vietnam's Air Force stands as a formidable foe is a quite difficult idea. Most of these equipment will soon be retired due to its decade-long use and the need to modernize. This is what brings us to the most important part of the video: modernization. Vietnam is currently pursuing an active engagement with making its air force a better player in the region, better equipment, and one that can stand up against China. Yes, throughout Southeast Asia, we are seeing a massive arms build-up in deterrence to China's continued claim in the South China Sea. Vietnam is no outlier, especially its geographical distance from China. In 2023, the most interesting political play that occurred was when President Joe Biden flew to Vietnam, which saw the two countries' bilateral relations upgraded. There have been many talks recently about a potential F-16 deal. But before we discuss that, let us first say that Vietnam has gotten the approval from the US government to receive Beechcraft T-6 Texan II trainer aircrafts in 2021. These represented one of the major projects under renewed US-Vietnam cooperation. The Beechcraft T-6 Texan II is a turboprop aircraft built by Raytheon. These trainers would be used to train Vietnamese pilots in the handling of Western aircrafts. Or, to put it simply, it is not just an aircraft to train pilots in general, but to train pilots to operate US-made jets. And then came the F-16. In 2023, the US has actively been in talks about a transfer of F-16 fighter jets to Vietnam. The deal is still in early stages and could go on for years. However, if it does happen, it could be the biggest ever defense deal between the two. What this proves is that Vietnam is slowly shifting its armaments from Russia to a more diversified use. Remember Israel, and now the US. Further, these F-16s represent a bigger threat to China. One report, published by Global Times, a Chinese state-owned media, reported that these F-16s will sabotage peace and stability. The article further showed that Chinese military experts said that the US proposal has its own hegemonic goals. The fact that these state-owned media are claiming such a narrative can truly shift the South China Sea story. But this narrative isn't what we want to know today. What we want to understand is that if these do come to pass, Vietnam's Air Force will jump in numbers in its actual strength. F-16s are no joke. They will arguably make Vietnam one of the strongest air forces in Southeast Asia. But the F-16s are also not the sole ones in the line. As Vietnam continues to increase its defense spending, many will have to participate. The US arms embargo was lifted in 2016, and since then, we saw a huge influx of US defense companies trying to sell to Vietnam. In late 2022, for instance, saw US defense firms and top Vietnamese government officials to discuss potential supply deals for helicopters and drones. Drones are a vital piece of one's future in the Air Force field. In 2019, Vietnam had actually purchased 6 military drones from Boeing. These are known as the ScanEagle unmanned aerial vehicles, drones that can operate above 15,000 feet and hover over a battlefield for extended missions of up to 20 hours. And this brings us to today's answer. Is Vietnam's Air Force strong? Well, not yet. But if Vietnam continues this trajectory of acquiring advanced aircrafts, then it is safe to say that one day they will eventually become a powerhouse in the region. But anyway, do let us know what you think. Thanks for watching.